thank you, I'm good. I may be crazy, but I'm not crazy enough to go after John Wick. Hi, I'm Danny Quinn, and welcome to another episode of First Impressions. On today's episode, Keanu Reeves gets suited and booted as he prepares for war in the third chapter of the John Wick franchise. After the events of the last movie, John Wick, played by Keanu Reeves, has now been rendered excommunicado, meaning that he no longer has access to all the privileges of the criminal underworld, and if that wasn't bad enough, he also has a $14 million bounty on his head. So he calls upon a few favours from Anjelica Huston's enigmatic director and Halle Berry's Sophia as he travels to Morocco in a bid to resolve his situation. Meanwhile, Asia Kate Dillon's adjudicator is sent by the High Table to punish Wick's allies, including Lawrence Fishburne's Bowery King and the Continental owner Winston, played by Ian McShane, who will not go down without a fight. Hoo boy, have I been really anticipating this film. I first started getting into the John Wick franchise right around about the time the second movie came out, and you might remember me reviewing it on this channel a couple of years back. I was pretty positive to the film overall, loving its action, its visual style, the world building, and Keanu Reeves' performance as the titular character. And I also remember saying that the ending was especially brilliant, not least because John Wick makes a decision that has devastating consequences for him. Not only is he excommunicated, but he also has a huge bounty placed on his head. And considering this is a world where assassins and killers are about as common as shopkeepers and could be lurking around any corner, that could be even in this house right now, that means literally anybody could be an opportunist out to kill him. Because let's face it, $14 million, that is a shit load of money. And that's pretty much where the third film picks up from. When we're first reintroduced to John Wick, he's seen running through the streets of New York like a madman, trying to get his affairs in order before the excommunicado goes into effect. He's pretty much like me whenever I have to try and get my college assignments done in time, and I'm just rushing through them to try and get them done and get them handed in. It's a very lengthy sequence that's tinged with suspense and dread, culminating in a fantastically choreographed and brutal showdown in an armoury before Wick escapes on horseback. The whole opening 20 minutes of this film is fucking mental. It's pretty much a blatant attempt to one-up the insanity of John Wick Chapter 2's opening, right down to the fact that we see a Buster Keaton film being projected against a building, which pretty much sets the tone for just how crazy and insane this world can get. The opening 30 minutes of this film are so fucking fantastic that they would have been an excellent climax to any other action film, or even served as a great short film. And I can honestly guarantee that once I get this movie on Blu-ray, and I definitely will be getting this film on Blu-ray, I can definitely see myself watching that opening 30 minutes over and over and over and over again, just for that first half hour alone. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this movie is blowing its load early on. In fact, this movie is just getting started. It does admittedly slow down a little bit after that jam-packed, insanity-filled first 30 minutes, as we see John trying to pull a few favours from his reluctant allies, but the film does maintain a consistent feeling of momentum. It never drags, but at the same time it never feels overwhelming or overly bombastic like your typical Michael Bay movie. It's just a little over 2 hours, and yet it mostly feels quite short. And Reeves is fantastic as always. Up until recently, he's had this reputation as a very bland, emotionless actor, and it sort of seems like Reeves has sort of embraced that image somewhat. He's playing a stoic, ruthless and efficient killer who's emotionally had to shut himself off in the wake of all this tragedy. He's tried to escape this lifestyle before, but against his own will, he keeps being drawn back into it. You really feel like you're alongside him as he descends further and further into hell. In fact, it's honestly kind of amazing that this whole franchise started over a fucking puppy. But it still works because nobody fucks with a puppy. You just don't. You don't kill a man's dog, especially if that man is John Wick. And it works not just because Reeves sells the action, I mean he does a lot of it himself, but by this point the character is pretty much at his lowest ebb all throughout the film. The past two films he's had a reputation as the Boogeyman, but here he's on the defense all throughout the movie. The hunter has officially become the hunted. The rest of the cast are all really good too, even if they're not given a ton to do. Ian McShane is still great as always in the role of Winston, who's given his biggest role in the franchise to date as he's left to clean up John Wick's mess. And it's great to see Halle Berry back in a big blockbuster again after Kingsman 2, but just like that film, she doesn't really appear in it as much as you might think. She's only in it for most of the second act and then she just kind of disappears. And Lawrence Fishburne also returns as the Bowery King and he's just having a whale of a time. You can tell that he's really enjoying being back as this really hammy, overly dramatic character. You can tell he's hamming up the role with great gusto. But again, he is kind of a little bit underutilized. I think that's a little bit disappointing because I think his appearance in the second film did kind of hint at the possibility of him and Wick teaming up in a future film, and they do sort of hint towards that in this movie, but at the same time it is a little disappointing to see that it doesn't really happen in this film. He sort of shuts himself off from Wick at the very start of the film, and then he only really appears sporadically throughout. So, like me, if you were hoping that maybe he would have a bigger role in the third film, I think you are going to be a little bit disappointed, unfortunately, because he really isn't in it that much at all. Unfortunately, you also have Mark Dacascos as Zero, the main assassin who's been hired to kill Wick, and he's a complete fanboy over Wick. He pretty much idolizes him, he loves him, he worships him, but he's also really looking forward to having the chance to kill him. And I think that's pretty interesting because I think up until now, the John Wick films haven't really had fantastic villains. I mean, Vigo from the first movie I thought was pretty good, but he wasn't necessarily a physical threat to Wick. And then the same goes for Santino in the second film, who's just a complete coward. But thankfully Zero, this dude is a straight up threat. I mean, there's a couple of moments throughout this film where I genuinely thought Wick might die. Also on a side note, one of the guys who plays Zero's henchman is actually played by the same actor who played Mad Dog in The Raids. Speaking of The Raids, this movie has some of the best hand-to-hand combat scenes I've seen since the Raid movies. The action in this film is downright exhilarating. It's punchy, it's brutal, it's balletic, and just really damn fun. And director Chad Stahelski still does a fantastic job sort of filming and editing these scenes together. And you can tell he's gotten very confident with the action to the point that there's quite a few set pieces in this film that utilise long takes. I can't really think of any issues I have with the film. I guess maybe it's not quite as much of a great character study as the first one. I think the first one is still probably the most unique of the films. Like, it manages to get a lot of depth out of what could have been a very standard direct-to-DVD revenge film. And the second one I love just before upping the ante and sort of going bigger and more bombastic and sort of taking us into the world of John Wick even further. And I think that is something that I do find quite interesting, this whole world of contract killers and criminals who sort of operate on loyalty and honour, and if you break those rules, you're fucked. It's a pretty fascinating world, and I really can't wait to see more of it. It's very hard for me to rank all three John Wick films. I mean, sometimes I sort of think the first movie's the best, and then other days I sort of think the second one's the best, and then I think the third one sort of takes the best aspects of 1 and 2 to make a very fun beast of a film altogether. And what I will say is that with these three films, I think we've gotten one of the most consistently good trilogy of films in quite some time. Probably the best action movie trilogy since, well, the Bourne films, the first three Bourne films. It's that damn good. And honestly, after seeing this film, I'm really excited to see where they go for further installments. I'm really curious to see just how the hell are they going to try and top this one, because this is just a fantastic action film. Like, it's a real blast to watch on the big screen. And once it comes out on Blu-ray, I am going to be watching it again and again and again. I can almost guarantee it. I'm going to give John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum a strong 8 out of 10. If you've seen the first two John Wick films, I'd strongly recommend this one. I'd also really recommend checking out these two films as well. I can't recommend them enough. They're an absolute blast. So John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum, have you seen it yet? If so, what did you think of it? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What did you like about it? What did you not like about it? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you once again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to leave a like, leave a comment, maybe even subscribe to my channel while you're at it. If there's anything I can do to improve my presentation, do let me know. I'm always happy to hear feedback. If you want to follow me on social media or support me on Patreon or check out my websites, links are below down in the description. And until next time, I'm Danny Quinn, and I hope you have a pleasant evening.